It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and today is a bit of a pop-up live, but it's with a friend of ours that we've known for a while, and we've done a number of interviews together, and there she is. So excited because Chelsea's book just came out, and when ours came out, she reviewed it, and her comment is on the front cover. And hi, Chelsea, and I'm
Hi.
gonna and it doesn't really matter, but we're so pleased that our that we're in your book too, right
That's
there.
right.
So welcome and congratulations on this book,
Thank
which is going to help a lot of people. And we always talk about, the table that going through getting out of a narcissistic relationship, and especially going through the legal system, you need all these legs to be as
Yes.
stable as possible. And one of them, besides a high conflict divorce coach, is a therapist who understands narcissistic abuse, and you yourself have been there. So why don't you introduce yourself to anyone who might not already know who you are?
Yes. Well, I'm so glad to do this pop-up. This is so spontaneous for me as an introvert, y'all. So it's because I love you that I'm here. Um, but yeah, so glad to be here. So I'm a psychotherapist specializing in narcissistic abuse and relational trauma. I obviously practice this and I've worked with lots of clients in therapy and coaching, and I have my own personal background in this as well. So I have been narcissistically abused. I continue to have to deal with narcissists on many levels. So I always tell people I get it on many levels. Like, I'm not just here to help you theoretically, like I am in the trenches with you. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
And you're a member of the Been There, Got Out club in your own way.
Yes. Been there,
Because
got
it
out.
sounds like you're in a healthy new, or not new, but a healthy relationship at this point, which is wonderful, especially. And I feel like people like us, when we get in new healthy relationships, you're just so much more grateful
Yeah.
because of the
Oh,
contrast,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, we talked about that. Like, if you've never had, like, if you never had a narcissistic relationship, you take so much for granted. Like that people are nice or that they
Mm.
care about you, that they have good intentions, that they're not lying to you or being deceptive. Like it's hard for me to wrap my mind around because I didn't grow up with that. Like I grew up with some narcissistic relationships. I had adult romantic relationships. I've had in work, like so many different spaces. So when I have a healthy person, it's like, wow, this
I know,
is different.
every day, right? Right? It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
completely
it's
different.
it is. It is. So speaking of that, one of the things that we deal with a lot, that like almost every day with our clients and people in this community, is that even when they get out of these toxic relationships, the person's voice is still in their head. And, because Chris and I are high conflict divorce coaches, and we focus on helping people get through the legal process of family court and separating, that something that holds people back is when they are still so spun up and they're giving us information saying, well, I'm not allowed to do this. I'm not allowed. And I'm like, wait a second. Wait, what do you mean you're
You're
not
not
allowed?
allowed.
Who told you that? Who told you that you had to come back early from your vacation? And it's like, oh, well, my ex or my ex's attorney. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like a
Yeah.
judge didn't say that, then that doesn't matter. But people are still, that authority that they lived with remains in their head.
Mm.
So I wanted to ask you to talk about some of the mindset shifts that are in chapter 11 of
Yeah.
this book, because it's something that is it's an obstacle to not just
Yeah.
recovery, but I mean recovery in general, but getting legally out, it can be an obstacle.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'm so glad you framed it that way because that is why I think it's so important to find a therapist and like a high conflict divorce coach or whoever's in your space who gets this, because you do often start talking that way. You're like, well, I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this. And people who've never had narcissistic relationships do or coercively controlling relationships don't understand what you mean. And they look
Right.
at you like you're the crazy one, and then you already feel crazy. So you're like, yeah, I am the problem. What is wrong with me? Like, why do I think like this? That is an effect of narcissistic abuse. And that is why I put the mindset shifts in the book, because I feel like if you don't know what to expect from healing, then you will stop yourself because you'll judge yourself so much, you'll just go around and around in a circle. And it's like you're making progress, but then you don't realize that, oh, this is a normal part of healing. So then you'll stop.
Right.
So yeah, I've talked about mindset shifts, which we can get into. And then I also have reasons people stay stuck. Because
we want to know all of this.
Yeah, both are really important. So one of the mindset shifts I know I talked about is that healing is possible whether you stay or go. I included that because I know there's a lot of people who don't have the luxury of just leaving their narcissistic relationship. I know you guys see this all the time, like when you're working with people in some form or fashion, you will have contact with this person if you share children. You know, divorce is obviously tricky, so you might be co-parenting with them. This might be a person in your family. This might be a boss or colleague that you can't just leave your job yet, or you don't have that option. So healing is possible whether you stay or go. Now, does that mean that it's going to be easy? No. And that's why I say it with a heavy heart, because I know that healing is going to be harder if you're in it. It's like the difference between walking up a mountain with nothing on your back and walking up a mountain with 100 pounds on your back. Like the journey is going to be harder. You're probably going to have to take more breaks. You're going to need to be more compassionate. You're going to need to have more supports in place, because you are like, you make progress and then the narcissist pulls you down. Like they tug at your backpack and then you fall down a little bit. You can still make progress. Like you're still moving up the mountain, but you're not necessarily going as quickly. So you have to have realistic expectations for yourself.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. So that was number one for sure.
Okay. What else? What else keeps people stuck?
So the second one that I talked about is that there is no right or wrong way to heal. I know a lot of times you guys probably hear this, like, just tell me what to do. Like, what should I be doing here? And you can probably give some, guidelines for sure. And I can as well in therapy or coaching. But I like to tackle that mindset, first of all, that I have all the answers, first of all, because people come in therapy or coaching and think that, maybe I have all the answers or I'm the expert, and they're kind of giving up on themselves because they've learned not to trust themselves in their narcissistic relationship. Mm-hmm. And I like to push back on this idea that there is a right or wrong way. Like what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. So it's more important that you start tuning into you, your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. You're kind of getting reacquainted with yourself because you lose yourself in a narcissistic relationship. So it's just simple, everyday, intentional asking yourself, what do I think? How do I feel right now? What do I need? And you need to know that it's more about tuning in to who you are and what you need rather than, am I doing this right? Because that in and of itself will keep you stuck.
Yeah, what you said makes me think about when you said like learning what your needs are and what works for you. Mm-hmm. I think about how in narcissistic relationships, there's so much betrayal and deceit. And then what actually happens is it's not just that you learn not to trust other people, is that you don't trust yourself anymore because you don't trust your own judgment. And so what you said makes me think of how important it is to start paying attention to your feelings and learning to trust yourself again, which is of course much easier said than done and takes a lot of work and practice. But that falls into exactly what you're talking about, I think.
Yes, 100%. And it's something that I think survivors don't even necessarily realize that they got away from. Like it feels so foreign to check in with yourself that you think, well, you're so used to dismissing your own needs because that's easier sometimes in a narcissistic relationship because you already know your needs will be dismissed by the narcissist. So if you just kind of pull back from caring about your own needs too, then sometimes it's a way you try to manage the hurt, but it's also has that other negative side effect of you lose you and you lose what is important to you, what you need, and how to heal, because you have to be acquainted with yourself in order to know how to heal.
Yeah. I mean, again, like always when I talk to you, Chelsey, I start taking all these notes because when you say something, it makes me think of something that I could relate to. And with losing that sense of self, in my experience with my marriage from, I met I met in my very early 20s, but I felt like I let myself be led. It was easier. It was just like, well, I guess, like I just didn't even pause to think, is this right or wrong for me? I just thought, okay, okay, okay. And a lot of people in these relationships tend to be easygoing, and that's usually a positive trait. But easygoing people who just say, okay, you know, whatever you want's fine. Like, where do you want to eat? Oh, whatever you want. It's okay. That can harm you because you do lose. Like, well, what do you actually want?
Yeah.
And you get into that dynamic of the relationship where you just let the other person choose without even realizing that that's what you're doing.
Right. Yes. And you're hitting on something where a lot of survivors are agreeable. Like we talk about that personality trait of someone who's just really agreeable. You're cooperative, you care about what's best for the group. Like you're not going to be the one who is going to raise your hand to start a conflict. Like you avoid conflict, just go with the flow. And you're right, it is a great personality trait. And narcissists, no surprise, are highly disagreeable. They tend to be the one who will take the argument, who are okay with conflict, who will push back, who want what's best for me, not what's best for anyone else. And so you're right, it's a slow process. And that's one of the things I talk about why people get stuck is believing you should have known better. And that I feel like kind of relates to this because people are like, well, I should have known that this person was narcissistic or toxic because this and this. Like I didn't make any of my own choices, and they were really controlling, or they always wanted to be in the lead, or whatever. But who thinks, if you have no understanding of narcissism, who thinks that that is like a manipulative tactic to wear you down? You think you're making your own choice. You think, and in a way you are, like you're just going with the flow. You're being you. You don't realize that this other person has a more manipulative plan for you and is like slowly wearing you down by getting you to never make your own choices. So it's really not fair to judge ourselves and think, oh, I should have known better, because who in their right mind would think that someone is being so manipulative? Like that's way crazier to believe than like that you're just going along because it's just how your relationship is.
Again, I just took it. I was like, ooh, that made me think of the definition of coercive control. I mean, that's when the other person basically wants to have you avoid conflict. Yeah. So in order to avoid conflict, the best way is to have just one person's opinions and desires and feelings and needs count. And so people who don't ever have conflict, it's not usually because everything's wonderful all the time. It's because one person is giving in. And I also was thinking about something I read recently about a study done on people who get ALS, where they're basically like their brain is still fine, but they're paralyzed and they can't speak. And they found that a huge percentage of them were really nice people. Like everybody, they're just like super agreeable and really, really nice. And we always talk about the physical effects on a person's body of narcissistic and emotional abuse, and you lose your voice. This disease literally takes you are paralyzed and you can't speak. Isn't that fascinating? Like,
yeah,
the book had nothing to do with abuse either. It was just, I don't remember what it was. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, like for how you end up feeling, like that you lose touch with your own body, and it's funny because a lot of emotional symptoms show up physically. People, they'll have this, weight on their shoulders, or they'll say they're tight in their chest, or they feel sick to their stomach, or they feel like their throat is closing up because it's like so obvious. I always like to ask people, what would your throat say, like if it could talk? Kind of like personifying these different body parts and how they're carrying all of this, because there's a reason that physical symptoms kind of show up, or emotional symptoms show up in these physical ways. Like it's literally a manifestation of how you feel emotionally.
Yeah. And also with people losing their voice, again, it's like symbolic that 100%. There's issues with throat. Yeah. I know so many times when I go to court, I mean, this was luckily short term, but I wouldn't be able to talk. I feel like I had to keep coughing or I couldn't speak well. And I'd need water. And in our courtroom, you can't take water in. So it'd be like, it happened so many times. And I never thought about that as being a manifestation of being really stressed out at that time.
Yeah. Not to mention the physiological symptoms of just being high stress, the cortisol, like your, prefrontal cortex kind of goes offline and you go into your survival brain and all of that that's happening. There's also the emotional symptoms too that show up. We call them somatic symptoms. If your physical symptoms, have emotional origins. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. You lose your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell us some other mindset shifts.
Okay, let's see. Also, I talk about how triggers aren't a sign of weakness. That is such an important mindset shift because that is often what people really judge themselves for and feel a lot of shame about, is that they can't function the way that they want to, that they have a cloudy mind, that they lack motivation, that they're always tired, that they walk on eggshells, like they feel like a people pleaser, or they feel hypervigilant all the time. I talk about how it's really important to differentiate between who you are and who your triggers are. Like your triggers say, I need to people please, or I need to walk on eggshells, or I have to isolate or withdraw. But that's a symptom. That's an effect of narcissistic abuse. Like that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means that you went through something bad. So triggers really validate your reality, because you wouldn't have triggers if you didn't go through something traumatic. Like you wouldn't feel this way unless, someone had criticized you and was belittling to you and gaslighted you and made you question your reality. Like that's the reason you feel the way you do. And I think that's what's so tough about psychological and emotional abuse is we don't have that concrete thing to say, okay, this caused how I feel. Like with physical abuse, there's a bruise, there's a cut, there's something you can see, like this person did this to me and then my body reacted this way. You don't have that with psychological and emotional abuse. You have what this person did, but you're not still really fully sure if that's abuse. And then you have how you feel, and it's so messy. You don't recognize that how you feel and what you're going through is because of their abuse, because you may not even call it abuse yet. So there's like,
yeah, I see a comment that says emotional terrorism, which is perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, what you just said, I can think of a perfect example. So we talk about this a lot when people dealing with a high conflict divorce or separation or post-judgment issue, which is all of our people, that one really common response is, and even in myself, when I open up an email from the court or my ex-attorney, it's just like, oh my gosh, and my heart starts beating. And like, I got excellent court orders a couple of weeks ago. We were on vacation. And I knew that it was going to be okay, but I got really cold. I get like shivery when I do it, and I can't help that. So that's like a trigger. The courts, I understand why. And it happens, but sometimes people would be like, but you're 9 months, 9 years. This is 9 years. Like, why do, and I've prevailed the whole time, but it's 9 years. And I still get like that initial, like, oh my gosh. And we see in our clients, I'm sure you do too, that people say, why do I still have this trigger? Why do I still have this response? It's been this much time. Shouldn't I be over it? And I heard someone speak recently, it was like a parenting expert, and she said a line that I keep using. It's like, you're not responsible for your first feeling. You can't help it.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it's like we can't help how we feel initially, and just to be able to name it and be like, okay, I'm freaking out because I'm opening up something from my ex's attorney and this always freaks me out. I can't help feeling that, but then I have to talk myself through or talk to someone else and be like, it's okay. It's fine, and you can't help it. And it does get better over time, but it doesn't always go away. Like you said, like it doesn't mean that you're not healing and recovering. It's just that this is the past, and we still carry it with us to a certain extent, but it doesn't, it stops being where like an obstacle from helping you function.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I've heard that before. I love that line. You're not responsible for your first feeling, because that's just your initial reaction. You're responsible for how you follow up with that feeling.
Exactly.
What you do afterwards, or how you can show compassion to yourself. But that first reaction is just what it is. And that's how trauma works. Like trauma gets stored in the body.
Yeah.
And I like to use these other analogies because I think we make sense of them. Like if someone has had a car accident, or they were mugged, or they were in a war zone, like we expect them to have certain triggers with loud noises, sometimes getting back in the car, like hearing traffic, like all of those things can be triggers. And we don't think, what's wrong with you? Like, why haven't you healed from that yet? We understand they went through something. Their body had a really strong emotional reaction. And for narcissistic abuse, it's like a mini explosion every day, like for how long? For decades. And then you get out of it and you're like, well, I'm a month out or 6 months out or 2 years out. Why do I still feel this way? Imagine how many times your body like went through that cycle of a physiological reaction of being triggered into that fight or flight. And it's not a car horn or a firework that sends off your trigger. It's an emotional expression. It's seeing someone's name. It's driving by a place where you were with your ex. It's smelling their perfume or their cologne. It's
a car
exactly.
that's the model that they used to have.
So much. Yeah. And that's because fear is generalized. That's something else I talk about in my book, is how fear is generalized. So you go from this person, but when trauma is relational, your traumatic or your trauma triggers are happen within relationships. So anything that reminds you of that person sets off that physiological fight or flight reaction. I mean,
yeah.
Can you imagine like how many triggers we have for certain people? Like songs, movies, smells, sights, sounds, like everything you shared with them. So much. And that gets encoded, in the body. And so it's not about always, like you said, triggers do lessen, but it's not about getting rid of the trigger. It's about changing the relationship you have with that trigger. Like you're saying, you talk yourself through it now, you know what's happening, you reach out for help. Where people get stuck is judging themselves for the trigger.
Right.
Feeling like I shouldn't have to feel this anymore. What's wrong with me? Why am I not over this? That's when people get stuck.
And that's really also denying yourself valid feelings. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I should be like, that's not helpful at all.
No. And who says?
Right.
And going back to like what you said in the beginning, people have all these, you end up putting yourself in this box because you're in a narcissistic relationship and you realize, well, I can't do this and I can't say this and I can't feel this way and I can't ask them of this. So your world is so shrunk that you feel like you can't do anything, to the point at which you can't even feel how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like they've gaslit you or they've controlled you for so long that now they're out and you're still doing it to yourself because you're so familiar with that.
Right. And I mean, the first step is even recognizing you're doing that. Like, I think a lot of people, it just becomes how it is,
Yeah.
This is just how it is. I can't ask them of that. I can't say this. I can't expect that. I can't say no to that. First step is just why. I'm just like exploring. Why do you feel that way? And why do you think that? Because people initially think like, this is just how it is. I don't have a choice.
I know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And going to that, I think one of the mindset shifts I talked about too is that you are not who the narcissist said you were. That's a really important thing for people to understand, because I'll tell you, especially for clients who had narcissistic parents, I hear so much like once they recognize their parent is narcissistic, they start using the narcissistic parent as the standard to which they compare themselves. They're like, well, I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be like my narcissistic father. And the narcissist becomes like the standard, even though they're the negative standard. They're what you don't want to be. They're still your standard. And then you get in this weird battle of like, well, anytime I ask for help, I feel like I'm being like my narcissistic mom. So I never ask for help. That's where I see people getting stuck, because they so don't want to be whoever the narcissist said they were or like the narcissist, that they go way over here and they go way the opposite way. So if a narcissist said, you're selfish, you're so rude, you're so sensitive, then you will avoid anything that could possibly make you look or feel selfish, anything that could possibly make you feel like you're being too sensitive or rude. So you're probably going to go way over here and be a people pleaser, never set boundaries, never ask for your needs to be met. That's not healthy either. So the narcissist cannot be the standard.
Oh my gosh. Like two huge examples I thought of for that. This was in my own relationship, and exists in a lot of our clients' relationships when they're in marriages. The person will say, if you leave me, you're breaking up the family. Like, how selfish of you to destroy our children's lives
Yeah.
by wanting to get a divorce from me. How dare you? And that's what kept me in for a really long time. And so that fits exactly what you say. Is like, I don't want to be
Yeah.
selfish. Like, I don't want to do this. So I'm going to stay and suffer. And my kids, it's going to be worse for my kids. That's a whole other
Yeah.
story, to stay in this relationship. And the other one was when you talked about you're not who the narcissist says you are. With our clients dealing with the family court system, they're dealing with constant false allegations where a narcissist or
Yeah.
toxic person is saying, well, you're an unfit parent and I'm going to come after you and I'm going to get custody because you're this, this, this. And so it's a strategy, which we explain to our people, is like
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to deflect from the stuff that actually matters. And often when we go through what does matter, it's a relief to them because it's like, oh, that doesn't even relate. Because when somebody is accusing you of things that aren't true, the natural inclination is to defend
Yeah.
yourself. But in the court system, you don't have time to defend yourself against a lot of things that don't even matter. So it is really important to have that mindset shift in place. Is like, you're not who the ex says you are. Here's why, and here's what we need to actually focus on.
That's huge. I so see that too, especially because, like you said, survivors are often very agreeable. So you
Mm-hmm.
are often already, I know I work with a lot of, empaths and highly sensitive people who are also, narcissistic abuse survivors. So you're already way out of your comfort zone dealing with the court and the legal stuff. And you're trying to like dot your I's and cross your T's, and like make sure you're
Right.
doing everything. The narcissist just over here throwing stuff out, has no proof of anything. They're very inflammatory. They often get lawyers that are inflammatory too, that will kind of, I'm sure, like raise the
Yeah.
stakes and all that. So you get this document and you're like, what are we going to do with this? Like, this isn't true. And well, you don't have to do anything with it because they actually have to prove this. And just like you said, that
Exactly.
shift, like
I'm
you
like,
can't
the
explain
burden
it.
is on them. It's not on you. It's on them. But people get like, oh my gosh, because they put it out there, everyone's going to believe it.
Yeah,
No.
right. That's part of them, like just the dumping of just all the stuff and
Right.
just to keep you spinning your wheels because you often look more guilty if you try to disprove everything, because how do you disprove something that's not true in the first
Right.
place?
And it gets you emotional. And in family court, doesn't work well.
No. Yeah. So that's such a good point, and that's exactly in alignment. Like the narcissist works so hard to control the narrative and control
Exactly.
reality. And they just
Mm-hmm.
throw stuff out there, and they hit you over and over and over again with it. Like that, you're going to break up the family. Like, you're so selfish. Why would you say that? Like all the things that they throw at you all the time. And so in your head, it's like I describe it like there's this externalized critical parent watching everything you do, or
Mm-hmm.
just this externalized voice. Because I'll be talking to clients and they'll say something and they'll be like, but that probably sounds so rude. And I'm like, did somebody else join our conversation? Like, where'd that come from? And that's what narcissistic abuse does, though, is it puts this like externalized critical voice in your head, and it's the narcissist. So recognizing
Yeah.
that that's the narcissist, that's not you.
Yeah. I just saw a comment. Somebody said they're scared to go to court. And I want to say that's a normal feeling,
Yeah.
and getting the right support to understand what's coming and why will help ease that fear.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And narcissists often, as I'm sure you guys know, like use that threat of court and stuff against you, because people they don't want to deal with it. And it can be stressful, but I always say, like, what you're dealing with is already really stressful.
Right. Right. It's
I mean,
just part of the stress.
yeah.
It's a new field for the stress,
Yeah.
but one good thing is that these people are very predictable for us,
Yeah.
especially in the legal setting. So there's a lot of strategies that we teach as well, that it's like, we know this is going to happen. We know you're going to be
Yeah.
accused of parental alienation. We
Yes.
know it. We can prepare for that. Don't worry. The truth is the truth. That's what people forget too, with having that person's voice in their head. They forget what the truth is and what's real.
Yeah. Right. It's coming back to reality. That's it, undoing the gaslighting. I mean, like all narcissists gaslight. They all try to control your reality. And so huge part of healing is, like I said, you are not who the narcissist said you were. and they don't get to control reality. They don't get to control the narrative.
Yeah. I just wrote that down. That's a great quote. Okay. What else, Chelsey?
Let's see. I have another few written down, which are, oh, one of the other healing mindset shifts is that anger is not a bad emotion. A lot of survivors feel that they shouldn't be angry. They really hesitate to dive into that emotion, or they struggle to even feel angry at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I often find that has to do, there's a link between anger and self-worth. Like, because when you see an injustice done out in the world, like abuse, genocide, heinous crimes, you feel angry about that. You're like, that should not have happened. That is not okay. Like when we see abuse of other people or mistreatment or injustice. And I'll ask people, like, how do you feel about those things? Like, yeah, they're mad about that. Like, that wasn't okay. That wasn't right. But where I see a lot of people getting stuck is if they think that they're somewhat responsible for the abuse, then why should, I don't have a right to be mad because I kind of caused this. I should have known better, so I shouldn't really be mad here. I should expect this. Like, what else did I think was going to happen? And so they really struggle to feel that anger toward the injustice done because they don't even necessarily feel that an injustice has been done to them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really relate to that. I'm sorry, I was getting distracted by a question. Somebody had asked, does a narcissist keep you away from family and friends too? But I want to get back to the anger thing because I have an example for that. That's just like another side question. You want to talk about isolation briefly?
Yeah. 100% they will, because you're much easier to control on your own. Narcissists often work to separate you, especially from people that see through the narcissist. Like if you have a really strong or healthy family member or friend or person who's like asking you, are you sure about them? Or the narcissist can sense that they're not controllable, then they will try to create a wedge between you and that person because they can sense that person might pull you away from the narcissist.
Right.
So
essentially like your support.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if someone's working really hard to isolate you from your family or friends or someone, like that's the sign to be looking for sure.
Yeah. But back to the anger thing that you just mentioned as being healthy, and so many people we call them our sweetie pies, people who are victims of narcissism. They're like the sweetest people. Right. And I remember years ago talking to a therapist who was asking me how I would feel about something terrible. And I was like, oh, I would blame myself. And she said, that's the wrong answer. Like, you need to feel angry. Like, think about like something is wrong. We need to get you to the point of anger, not blaming yourself.
Right. Exactly. And that is what keeps people stuck. Like, they've either been shamed and told that they shouldn't feel angry because the narcissist wants to control the emotional temperature. So they're always telling you how you should feel. Narcissist isn't going to allow you to have your feelings or be angry about what they're doing. So you're already really good at keeping a lid on your emotions. Like a lot of people will numb out. They'll kind of become apathetic where they just struggle to feel anything because you're so in your fight, flight, freeze fawn. You're in one of those like physiological responses that you struggle to feel anything except those things.
Yeah.
So as people start to recognize what they've been through, and that's why I often start with knowledge. Like, you have to understand what you've been through, how coercive control works, how narcissistic abuse works, how insidious it is, what gaslighting is. Because if you don't see that, then we're just going to go around and around, and you're going to keep blaming yourself and saying, well, but I could have reacted better though, or well, I shouldn't have said that, and they did have a stressful day, and they did tell me this, and you're just going to keep making excuses, justifications, rationalizations until you understand what you've been through.
Yeah. And I see, speaking of that comment, I get angry about the lies that are said in court about me, and then I feel bad with myself for being mad.
Yeah, but that's a totally normal, healthy reaction.
Right.
Like, if someone is lying about you, you should feel angry. Like, that is okay. And the anger can be a great motivator. Now, it's not something you want to get out of control. It's not something that means, you can just go destroy the house and hit people because you're mad. Like we teach kids, your emotions are okay, but you still can't act however you want to. You can't go hit someone just because you're mad. But there's nothing wrong with being angry, and anger often gives you the motivation to make some really hard choices, to decide to set a boundary, to decide to leave the relationship, to decide to, have that drive to start searching for other jobs if you work with a narcissistic boss. Like anger can be a great motivator. It's not going to be there forever either. Anger is one of those things that is usually a surface emotion that if you allow it and you process through it, you'll get to the other layers of feelings and you'll be able to like move past them and heal. But if you keep, that's a really important mindset shift. And with that, like deciding not to decide. So I'll expand on that. A lot of people initially come to therapy or coaching very frantic. They're like, I have to figure this out. Like I need to do something. I've been sitting on this. I don't know what to do. So they come with like a lot of anxious, frantic energy, but usually anxiety isn't a great starting point for difficult decisions. And so people will become obsessed. Like, should I stay in this relationship or should I leave? Should I stay in this workplace or should I leave? Should I keep talking to my narcissistic mother or should I just cut her off? And they just bounce back and forth and they can't decide and they can't decide. And like that indecision keeps them stuck. So I'll often tell people initially, decide not to decide. Give yourself the space to intentionally start just reflecting and observing patterns. Start learning about narcissistic abuse. Start recognizing how you feel around this person versus how you feel around this other healthy friend. Start to notice the guilt tripping that's happening over here, the manipulation. Like take the pressure off and give yourself time to just start to see what is instead of constantly being in your head about it, because it's not until you see what is and you really know what's happening that you're going to be able to make a choice about what to do. And so deciding not to decide, giving yourself that space and building yourself up outside of the relationship, like investing in healthy relationships, instead of becoming hyper focused on trying to fix this narcissistic relationship, like doubling down on, well, I'm going to try every communication strategy. I'm going to spend more time with them. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. Maybe you just take some time to build yourself up outside of that, like invest in personally meaningful goals, reconnect with friends you haven't talked to in a while, invest in things that are meaningful or helpful to you to get yourself in a different mental and emotional point. Once you feel healthier, your decisions usually become clearer. That anxiety is not the place to start to try to make a decision.
That's interesting. I have like three things. I don't know if I'm going to remember all three of them from what you just said, but getting someone in a highly emotional state is also a strategy with family court because you can't make good decisions in an emotional state. So that just fits with what you just said. And the thing that you said about deciding not to decide, I love that because I feel like with me, just in general, I always want to be like, I got to figure it out and I got to figure it out now. Right now I'm having something that I'm trying to wrap my head around because I'm not sure what to do. And it's like you gave me the message, like, you don't need to figure it out yet. Like, keep paying attention. And it's hard because Chris teases me because he's like, you're a click ahead. You're always like, let's go to the next thing. And I'm like, I have to pause, which is what we talked about in the beginning. It's like a conscious effort to have to just pause and slow down and think and not feel like everything has to be resolved immediately. So that's really helpful. And the third thing, which I just remembered, has to do with what you said regarding, just like the other things to do to work on your healing, like focusing on healthy relationships and stuff. So there's a book that I read recently that I've been recommending to everyone. It's called The Power of Fun by Catherine Price. And she talks about how when people are, this has nothing to do with toxic relationships. This is just about like healthy, like being in tune with the things that make us feel good. And she differentiates between self-care, which can be like relaxing and all that, but doing things that actually give you pleasure hormones. And she talks about how when we're little, when you're like 5 and you're playing tag, you're just like completely in the moment and thoroughly enjoying yourself. And I think for people dealing with narcissistic abuse or dealing with high conflict divorce or both and more, it is imperative to find activities that you can do where you're connected and not distracted, and to really spend a few minutes a day, even every couple of days, to get those pleasure hormones, because you're dealing with so much stress that there has to be some kind of counterbalance. So we've been pushing a lot to our clients, like the book has like a whole fun factors checklist and things that, like little quizzes you can take to figure out what you really like. And I thought this is so helpful because our people, including me, sometimes we forget what we actually enjoy because we're so removed. So I know one of our clients recently, we said for homework, you have to do something fun, because she keeps choosing things to do that she thinks she'd like, but they almost add more of a burden to her schedule, because it's like taking care of animals, which she loves, but it's like, oh no, another responsibility. So like going out and eating ice cream, going out and see like a really fun movie, like that's good for you. That's good for your soul. You need to have things like that.
No, I love that. And I like bringing other ideas and relating them to narcissistic abuse. I really think that's how we grow. So yeah, you're pretty much sapped of all fun, because you have to, I don't want to get too technical, but like nervous system wise, when you're in fight or flight, you have a really hard time like accessing that part of you. Your fun, creative, spontaneous part, you feel like you can't, like it doesn't feel safe to move into that, to be creative, to have fun, because I know for me, like, and it sounds really strange, but I have been afraid to be happy. Like that has not felt safe to me. Because as soon as you're happy, something will go wrong. As soon as you're happy, then you find out someone's been hiding something from you. They've been lying to you.
Oh, I can so relate to that.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm still a work in progress. Like just allowing myself to have fun. I still do not put that in my schedule as much as I should. I'm just so used to achieving, doing, being, like that I have to be really intentional, like taking time away. So I totally relate to that. And I think a lot of people need that. That's something in the back of my book. The very last chapter is on post-traumatic growth strategies. And I try to make that as insights, but also those practical strategies for helping people. What do you do? How do you survive? How do you thrive in these relationships, outside of these relationships? Because even if you get out, it's not like, oh, I'm done now. Like I don't have to heal. You're healing either way. So that last chapter is on really how do you make this practical? So you expand on what we're talking about here even more.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my, as always, Chelsey, this is so helpful, not just to people watching, but to me personally, because like I said, every time you're talking, I'm like, ooh, it's making me think of all these ideas. Very inspiring. So again, if you don't know, people, this is Chelsey's book, If Only I'd Known. There she is at the bottom. So can you tell people how to find it and how to find you?
Yes. So obviously I'm on Instagram, so you can come on over there. I have Facebook. I'm on all the other social media channels. My Instagram link has a link to all the places you can buy my book: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, wherever you like to shop. So thank you guys so much. Or thank you and Kristen so much for having me, and happy to always talk with you guys.
Same. Always a pleasure. Okay. So we'll talk again soon. And thanks again for coming on. I'm so glad this pop-up worked.
I know we had a back end, like it was spontaneous, so I'm glad we got it in.
Yes. And it was another excellent interview. All right. So take care, Chelsey. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.